Let's start with a financial dream that almost everybody has been taught to worship. Buy a home, lock in a 30-year mortgage, make payments, and one day you'll be free. Sounds safe, sounds responsible, sounds adult. But here's the uncomfortable truth. For most people, that 30-year mortgage is not a wealth plan. It's a wealth prison. And the bars on that prison are built from something called amortization. Here's the part nobody tells you. In the early years of a mortgage, you're not really attacking the house price, you're feeding the lender. As of April 2026, the average 30-year mortgage rate is around 6.37%. On a $300,000 loan, you can end up paying roughly $288,000 in interest over the life of that loan. Think about that. You borrow 300 grand and the bank can make almost another 300 grand just for letting you borrow it. And in the first decade, most of your payment is not building your freedom, it's servicing interest. That means you can spend years feeling like an owner while your actual equity grows at a painfully slow pace. That's the amortization trap. So if you've ever wondered why hard-working people can make payments for years and still feel financially stuck, this is why. They bought the dream, but they didn't understand the math. I'm Jacob, and today I want to show you a very different way to think about real estate. Not as a consumer, but as an owner. Not as someone buying shelter, but as someone building leverage.
Why you stay stuck?
Now, let's zoom out. Most people live on what I call the salary treadmill. You work, you earn, you pay bills, you try to save, something breaks, inflation rises, rent jumps, taxes bite, then you do it all again next month. It feels like motion, but it's not real progress. It's motion in place. The wealthy play a different game. They use an owner mindset. The salary treadmill asks, how much can I save from my paycheck? The owner mindset asks, how much asset control can I gain using smart structure? That's a massive difference. Because yes, real estate is expensive, apartments especially. A small multifamily deal can look totally impossible if your only lens is, how much cash do I have in my checking account? But that's the wrong lens. The real math of wealth is not just savings, it's leverage. A regular person putting a few $100s a month into the stock market can absolutely build wealth over time. That's solid, that's disciplined, that works. But it's usually slow. Real estate can compress time because you're controlling a larger asset with a smaller amount of personal capital, or in some cases with almost none of your own money if the deal is structured properly. That doesn't mean reckless borrowing. It doesn't mean buying junk. It means understanding one simple truth. Control of a great asset is often more valuable than ownership with all cash. If an apartment building increases in value, improves in cash flow, or gets repositioned the right way, the upside is calculated on the whole asset, not just on the little slice of cash you personally put in. That's why leverage, when used carefully, can create growth that feels impossible from a paycheck alone. So what does no money really mean? Because let's be honest, this phrase gets abused online a lot. No money down is not magic. It is not fraud, it is not lying to banks, and it is not pretending risk doesn't exist. What it really means is using OPM, other people's money, in a way that makes sense for everybody involved. And before that sounds too clever, understand this. The ultra-wealthy do this constantly. They buy assets, they let those assets grow, then instead of selling and draining their own cash, they borrow against the asset base. That's the basic idea behind the buy, borrow, die, or borrow until you die framework. Now, everyday investors are not billionaires, but the principle still matters. Rich people don't worship cash leaving their pocket. They worship control, cash flow, tax efficiency and asset growth. So when we talk about flipping apartments with no money, we're talking about structuring a deal where the purchase money, rehab money, or operating capital comes from sources like private investors, hard money or bridge lenders, seller financing, equity partners, gap funding, or a combination of these. Your job is not to be the bank. Your job is to find the opportunity, structure the terms, manage the risk, and create value. That's the shift. You stop thinking like a shopper, you start thinking like a deal builder. Let's get practical. Step 1 is not raising money. Step 1 is finding the right deal. In a shifting market, the best opportunities usually don't look pretty. They look awkward. They look mismanaged. They look like something most buyers don't want to touch. That's exactly why they matter. You're looking for what I call rock bottom opportunity. Not necessarily the cheapest building on the map, but the building where value is trapped and solvable. That might mean below market rents, poor management, deferred maintenance that looks ugly but is fixable, outdated units, a tired landlord who wants out, vacancy caused by neglect, not by location failure, and sellers with pressure, divorce, burnout, estate issues, debt, or relocation. A lot of beginners search for perfect. That's a mistake. Perfect gets bid up. Messy creates margin. And in this market, margin matters more than ever. Recent flipping profits have been tighter than many people expected. Typical gross profit figures have hovered around $65,000, with margins in the 25 to 27.5% range. And in many cases, that's before the full pain of mistakes, delays, holding costs, and bad assumptions shows up. So you do not make your money when you renovate. You do not make your money when you refinance. You make your money when you buy right. That means conservative underwriting, realistic repair numbers, realistic rent assumptions, and a backup plan if the market softens while you're executing. Now let's talk numbers, because this is where fantasy gets exposed. Imagine a small apartment deal priced at $1 million. A traditional buyer using standard financing might need 20% down equals $200,000, closing costs, reserves, and a rehab budget. So realistically, that buyer might need $250,000 to $300,000 available. Most regular people stop right there and say, I can't afford apartments. But let's look at a creative structure. Same $1 million deal. Maybe a motivated seller agrees to carry a portion of the note. A private lender funds the renovation, an equity partner funds closing and reserves. You bring the deal, the operating plan, and the execution. So instead of you bringing $250,000 out of pocket, it becomes seller financing, part of purchase, lender, rehab capital, investor, reserves, and closing, and you, sourcing, structuring, managing, and creating value. That doesn't mean you own 100% with zero responsibility. It means you use structure to control a deal that would otherwise be out of reach. This is where beginners get confused. They think the person with the cash wins. Not always. The person who can find, analyze, negotiate, and execute often becomes the most valuable part of the deal. Money is important, but a great deal with a credible operator attracts money. A bad deal with no plan repels it. Let's go one level deeper. How do you actually know whether a no money down structure is better? Simple. You compare debt and equity the same way a business owner would. If you put your own money into a deal, that money is now trapped until the deal exits or refinances. If you use outside capital, yes, you may give up some upside, but you preserve your own liquidity and potentially spread your effort across multiple opportunities. This is why smart investors obsess over one question: what am I getting in return for the cash I'm risking? Let's say your plan is to improve the units, raise rents, stabilize occupancy, and then refinance based on the new value. If the building's net income increases, the value can rise dramatically. That creates equity, not because the market got lucky, but because the property performs better. And this is the moment to understand the difference between good debt and dead debt. Dead debt buys things that shrink. Good debt helps you control assets that can produce income and grow in value. A financed luxury car that may look rich, that's often just a payment. A well-structured apartment deal that creates forced appreciation that can build actual net worth. This is where a lot of people get hit by what I call the logo tax and the friendship tax. The logo tax is when people spend money to wear status. The friendship tax is when people overspend just to keep up with a social circle that rewards appearances. Meanwhile, the quiet wealth builders are doing something less exciting on Instagram, studying deals, building lender relationships, and learning how to turn debt into equity. So let's walk through the basic play. You find a small apartment property with upside. Maybe it's 8 units, maybe 12, maybe 16. The rents are below market, the owner is tired, the property is ugly, but the location still works. You negotiate terms that protect the deal. Enough time to inspect, financing contingencies where appropriate, clarity on repairs, realistic closing timeline. Then you line up capital. This could look like a private lender funds acquisition or bridge capital, an investor funds reserves and part of the costs, the seller agrees to flexible terms, and you manage the repositioning. Then comes execution. You do not renovate blindly. You focus on value drivers. Clean up operations, fix what tenants actually care about, reduce vacancy, improve unit quality enough to justify rent increases, control expenses, and document everything. The goal is not to make the building fancy. The goal is to make the building perform. Then comes the exit. You have 2 main paths. Path 1, flip the whole property. Sell the improved apartment building for a higher value, pay back lenders and investors, then split the profit based on the agreement. Path 2, refinance. A new loan is based on the improved value. That refinance pays off the expensive short-term money, repays investors if structured that way, and leaves you holding the asset, along with the equity you created. That's where the game changes, because now the first deal doesn't just pay you, it positions you. Now let's talk about what makes the first win so powerful. The first apartment flip, if done correctly, is not just about one payday. It creates a snowball effect. Maybe your first deal gives you credibility. Maybe it gives you a small chunk of capital. Maybe it gives you lender relationships. Maybe it gives you confidence because now you've actually been through inspections, contractors, tenant issues, financing pressure, and the exit. That experience compounds. Deal number 2 gets easier to raise. Deal number 3 gets easier to spot. Deal number 4 gets better terms because now people know you can perform. This is how regular people start to look lucky from the outside. But it's not luck. It's one properly executed deal, creating momentum for the next. And this is why the wealthy don't just chase income. They chase repeatable systems. The consumer says, I made some money. The builder says, I built a machine. That machine includes brokers sending you off-market leads, lenders answering your calls, contractors who know your standards, investors who trust your reporting, legal and accounting support, and a repeatable underwriting process. That's not flashy, it's powerful. And that's what separates someone dabbling in real estate from someone turning apartments into long-term wealth. But let's do the reality check now, because this is where a lot of videos get irresponsible. This is not easy money. You can absolutely lose money in real estate. You can overestimate rents, underestimate rehab, choose the wrong contractor, miss a major repair item, get stuck in permit delays, hit higher interest costs, or buy in the wrong submarket at the wrong time. And because recent flipping margins have compressed, precision matters more than ever. If typical gross profit figures are around $65,000 and margins are sitting around 25 to 27.5%, a few bad assumptions can wipe out your edge fast. So the real transformation here is not just financial, it's psychological. You have to move from being a consumer to being a system builder. Consumers ask, what can I afford? What car should I get? What will people think? Can I look successful now? Builders ask, what asset solves a problem? What team do I need? Where is the margin? What are the downside scenarios? How do I protect capital? That's why so much real wealth is invisible. Invisible wealth markers are boring. Low ego, strong reserves, clean books, solid partnerships, disciplined underwriting, and delayed gratification. Meanwhile, public wealth theater is loud. Expensive watches, luxury leases, big tabs, big logos, big opinions. Quiet builders often look ordinary right before they become undeniable. So what's the big takeaway? The strategy nobody talks about is not really flipping apartments with no money, it's this. Stop trying to save your way into ownership like a consumer, start learning how to structure your way into control like an operator. That's the shift. The 30-year mortgage can keep people trapped because it teaches them to worship payments instead of understanding leverage. The salary treadmill keeps people busy, but ownership changes the scoreboard. And OPM, other people's money, is not some dirty trick. It's a tool. Used carelessly, it can crush you. Used intelligently, it can help regular people participate in deals that would otherwise be impossible. If you want to play this game, start here. Learn underwriting, study small multifamily deals, build relationships with brokers and lenders, understand seller motivation, practice conservative deal analysis, and stop confusing appearances with assets. Because the goal is not to look rich for 6 months. The goal is to build wealth you can control for decades. If this video changed how you think about real estate, hit like, subscribe, and comment owner mindset below. And if you want more breakdowns on leverage, creative financing, and how normal people can build equity without waiting 30 years, stay with this channel. One final note. This video is for educational purposes only. It is not personal financial, legal, or investment advice. Always do your own due diligence and work with qualified professionals before entering any real estate deal. And remember, the bank's favorite customer is the person who never learns the math. Don't be that customer. Be the one who learns to structure the deal.